Yesterday we have seen some movements of body. So today we are going to continue with that. So let's see the first movement today, that is rotation. So you can see here rotation, how the head is rotating. So in rotation, part of the body is turned around its longitudinal axis. So this is your longitudinal axis. So on which the part is going to rotate. So here there is a right lateral rotation of the head. In this, we are seeing left lateral rotation. So that's regarding rotation. This can happen in other parts of the body as well. We will describe that as we go through. Now there is other rotation which is specifically called medial and lateral rotation. So this occurs in the limbs, upper limb and lower limb. Here it occurs around their longitudinal axis. So this is the axis here. So in that axis, we are going to see rotation. So this one is medial rotation. This one is medial rotation. Medial rotation is the movement towards the midline, sorry, towards the midline. So this one is medial rotation, and here is the lateral rotation of the limb. Here, what happens? The movement is away from midline. So this is the midline, right? So if a movement is towards the midline, that is medial rotation. If the rotation is away from the midline, it is lateral rotation. Now specifically in the forearm, we have movements. They are called as pronation and supination. So this is specific to the forearm. So these movements are called as pronation and supination. Now you can see here, this is a supinated forearm. You can see the hand also along with that. Here it is a pronated forearm and hand. Here this is a supinated forearm and hand. This is pronated forearm and hand. You can also see the bones here. Certain changes happens in the bones of the forearm in this movement. This is radius, this is ulna, this is radius, and this is ulna. Anyway, movements of the bones we will see when we are detailing about upper limb. Right now, you should know what is pronation and supination. So pronation, we'll define pronation. This movement of the forearm and hand are rotated medially around their longitudinal axis so that the palm of the hand faces posteriorly. Basically, it happens in the longitudinal axis where the hand, this is the hand, so the palm of the hand, this is the palm of the hand that is going to face posteriorly. So always think about the movements in anatomical position. Supination, it is an opposite action of pronation. Here, what happens? Forearm and the hand are rotated from the pronated position to normal anatomical position. In supination is the opposite action of pronation where the palm of the hand is facing anteriorly. So you can just remember this as a mnemonic: kings pronate and beggars supinate. You can understand how the beggars usually do their begging, right? They just open their hand, right, facing their palmar aspect of the hand anteriorly, and they just beg, right? So beggars always supinate, where the kings, they always pronate. Now circumflexion. Circumflexion is a combination of the movements of flexion, extension, abduction, adduction, and rotation. So this is a combination of all the movements. You just imagine that you're bowling, a bowling action, how you bowl. So in bowling action is actually a circumflexion. All the movements are happening there, combination of movements. Look at this here. This is just a revision for you, just showing you abduction. So this is a long axis, the axis of the adduction abduction, which passes through the middle finger, right? When a finger moves away from the mid finger or the third finger, that is abduction. If it is coming close to that, it is adduction. Similarly, so this is abduction and adduction. Coming to flexion and extension, you see the flexion and extension of the fingers. This is a flexion. This is flexion. This is extension. You can also see that here, right? This is flexion. This is flexion, and the other one is extension. So when I explained here the movements, I was talking about the fingers, the medial four fingers, medial four fingers. I'm not talking about the thumb because thumb movement is little different from the other fingers because the thumb is placed in another plane. That is the reason. Now let's see the movements of the thumb. Look at this. Thumb, this is abduction and this is adduction. This is extension of the thumb. This is flexion of the thumb. And this is another action which is only seen in the thumb, that is opposition, where you can approximate the thumb with other fingers. Here also the opposition is demonstrated. So always remember, the movement of the thumb is not like that of your other medial fingers because the orientation of the thumb is not in the same plane as that of other fingers. We will try to explain all these things when we go through upper limb. But for the time being, remember the movement of the thumb is different from other fingers. Now coming to other actions or other movements, protraction, retraction. So it is self-explanatory. You can see this lady. This movement and the mandible, this is the mandible or lower jaw. When you move it forward, that is protraction. When you move it backwards, it is retraction. So protraction is defined as a movement of the part of the body that is moving forward. Retraction is the opposite action of protraction, where the part of the body is moving posteriorly. Elevation, depression. Again, the same lady. The movement of the lower jaw upwards or closing of the mouth, that is elevation. Opposite action is depression, where you can see the lady opens the mouth, where the lower jaw is moving downwards. That is depression. Again, you can see this movement in the shoulder. When you raise the shoulder up, that is elevation. When you push it down, that is depression. So these are self-explanatory. Another movement is called lateral flexion. Here, lateral flexion of the head can be seen. Now, how can you define it? When the ear is brought close to the shoulder. So here, this is right lateral flexion of the head. This is left lateral flexion, where you can see the left ear is brought close to the shoulder. So this is left lateral flexion. So the flexion can happen in the trunk also. So this area is the trunk, which includes thorax and abdomen. Now this movement is left lateral flexion of the trunk. If the person is doing in the opposite way, that would be a right lateral flexion of the trunk. Here it is right lateral flexion of head, left lateral flexion of head. Other movements, these are already done. Again, a revision. Abduction. Any movement from the midline or away from the midline, that is abduction. Any movement towards the midline, that is adduction. So abduction and adduction, which happens in the shoulder joint. Here, rotation can be seen. Lateral rotation, when the foot is moving away, when the limb is moving, rotating away from the median plane, that is lateral rotation, and the opposite is medial rotation. So this is possible in lower limb and the upper limb. Other movements, shoulder flexion, and coming to the normal position, anatomical position, this is extension. Here, shoulder abduction. This is normal anatomical position, abduction, and the opposite movement, that is adduction, bringing close to the midline, that is adduction. Again, flexion of the shoulder, flexion, and coming to the neutral position, extension, posterior movement, extension of the shoulder. In this, flexion at the knee joint can be seen with dotted lines. This is the flexed leg, and this is extended leg, which is represented here as dotted lines. So when we look at this picture, we can see something contradictory. So I'm going to explain that. Here, look at this. This is the anterior surface, isn't it? Anterior surface. So from here to here is anterior surface. Yesterday we were talking about that. And this surface is called as the flexor surface in the upper limb. But coming to the lower limb, this surface is called as flexor surface. I'm just repeating that once again. Anterior surface of the upper limb is a flexor surface. Posterior surface is extensor surface. But coming to lower limb, it is just opposite. This is extensor surface and this is flexor surface. So why it is so? Why in the upper limb anterior surface is flexor and posterior is extensor, and in the lower limb anterior is extensor and posterior is flexor? The reason is this one. This is called rotation of limbs. This happens in embryological period, where this is the bud, the upper limb bud, and this is lower limb bud. But as the limb develops, this is a normal position or usual position. But as it develops, what happens is that there is going to be a rotation. So this is extensor surface, what you can see here, and the opposite side, which I'm not able to show, that is flexor surface of the upper limb. Now, when the limb develops, as it develops, it's going to rotate laterally. So there is going to be a 90-degree rotation laterally for the upper limb. Okay, so this is extensor and the opposite side is flexor. So extensor becomes posteriorly placed, extensor surface becomes posteriorly placed, and the flexor surface become anteriorly placed. We have to do it today by showing your, I mean, by demonstrating your upper limb. I will just show you that. So this is the trunk. I mean, this is the upper limb bud. So this movement, right? So this is lateral rotation of the upper limb, whereas lower limb, look at this. This is the extensor surface. The opposite side is flexor surface, and it is going to rotate medially. So rotation is like this, medially rotated. So this surface, extensor, this becomes flexor. So it is because of the rotation this things happens. Anyway, coming to other movements, this is flexion of the trunk and this is extension of the trunk. Now some movements can be seen here. This is right lateral rotation, this is left lateral rotation, this is right lateral flexion, this is left lateral flexion, and this is flexion of the head and neck, of the head. Now we have seen different planes. We have seen sagittal plane, horizontal plane, frontal plane. Frontal plane is also called as coronal plane. So what are the movements that happens in these planes? In the sagittal plane, there are forward and backward movement. Forward and backward movement. For example, flexion, extension. It happens in sagittal plane. Now, frontal plane or coronal plane, the movements are side to side movements. They are adduction, abduction. This can happen in coronal plane or frontal plane. In the transverse plane, there can be twisting movements, rotational movements. We have seen the rotation of the head. So this can happen in the transverse plane. So this is a relation, or this is a uh, this you should know how which plane which movements are going to happen. So already we have seen this. So we are ending with the movements of the body in anatomical terms. Now coming to some other terms which are used in anatomy, basically regarding a vessel. So what is a vessel? Vessel means it's a tube, right? It can be of different types. So whatever vessels you have got three layers. From inner to outer, you have tunica intima, tunica media, and tunica adventitia. So these are the three layers of your vessel. You can see the heart here, and the arteries can be seen here. So inside a vessel, you can see the RBC, which are placed here. Let's see in detail of this. So what you're seeing here is an artery. So how can you define the arteries? They carry oxygenated blood away from the heart. So the heart pumps the blood, which is carried by the arteries into different parts of the body. Now veins are going to carry deoxygenated blood towards the heart. So whatever waste materials that is produced by the tissue and the carbon dioxide gases, they have they have been taken from the tissue level to the heart. That is a function of vein. Now capillaries, they are microscopic vessels connecting arterioles to venules. Now you should know that the artery takes blood from the heart. As the artery moves, it divides into smaller and smaller branches. The smaller branches are called as arterioles. Now arterioles are joining with or are going to form capillaries. They are microscopic vessels. Now these microscopic vessels, they will again combine to form venule, and the venules together they form vein. So artery, arterioles, capillaries, then venules, vein. So veins will take the blood towards the heart. So capillaries are the microscopic vessels which are connecting arterioles to venules. Now anastomosis as a term which is used, or you can say it's a communication basically between neighboring vessels. Now here the arteries, two arteries are coming up very close and they are going to communicate with each other. These communications are called as anastomosis. So anastomosis is nothing but communication between neighboring vessels. Now, talking about terms for bony features or bony structures, your bone is not smooth always. It has irregularities. So it can have elevations, depressions, openings, cavities, or it can have smooth areas. So we have defined each areas or each things into anatomical terms like elevations. If you have a linear projection, that is called as elevation, or that is included as elevation. So which includes ridge. This is ridge. Example, greater trochanter of femur. This is femur. This is a bone of thigh where you can see a projection here. That is called as a ridge. It is specifically called as greater trochanter of femur. So if it is a linear ridge, we can call it as a greater trochanter. If it is sharp, it's very sharp, which is called as spine. Spine. Spine is seen in skull bones, which is called as spine of sphenoid. I cannot show you here, but I will show you later. Rounded. If there is a rounded structure, which you can see at the angle joint, the medial aspect and the lateral aspect of the angle joint, you can see a projection there. They are called as malleolus. So we saw ridge, sharp structures, then round structures, malleolus. Okay, depressions are called as pit groove. So this is specifically seen in skull bones. Pit, small depression can be seen, which is called as pit. If it is little elongated, it is called as groove. Openings are called as foramen or canal. So this is one of the foramen, which is the biggest foramen. You can see in the skull, foramen magnum. So this is foramen. Cavities are the sinuses. So this also can be seen in skull bones, where you can see different sinuses like frontal sinus, ethmoidal sinus, maxillary sinus, sphenoidal sinuses. They have air cavities inside. This is used to reduce, or this is useful in reducing the weight of the skull bones, because skull bone is quite heavy. So to make it little lighter, there are some air cavities inside the skull bones. They are called as sinuses. Now, if you have a smooth articular areas, they are called as condyle or head. So this is a round elevation, can be called as head. So this is head of the femur. You can also see head in other parts of the bones, like head of the humerus. Humerus is a bone of arm. Anyway, we will come to all these things later. Now, some other terms which are used in anatomy as well as in clinical side. Itis is a term which is used for inflammation. So appendicitis, so, appendix is an organ which is a part of large intestine. If it is inflamed, this is called as appendicitis. Ectomy, where denoting surgical removal of a specified part of the body. So appendicitis, if it is inflamed, it has to be cut and thrown. That is appendicectomy, removing. Oma, oma means a growth. So lipoma was a growth in the lipoma is a growth actually. Symptoms and signs. Now there are two terms here which are used: symptoms and signs. Symptoms are subjective complaints. The patient is coming to you and saying that patient has a pain in the abdomen. So that is symptom. Okay. Patient is coming to you. You don't know what is happening in the abdomen. He says some discomfort, and you're going to press some part of his abdomen or her abdomen, and the patient says ah because of the pain. He just says ah, right? That is a sign. So symptoms are subjective complaints. When the patient comes and tells you, signs that you are going to find out. Another example, the patient is coming and telling you that he has a fever. That becomes a symptom. If a patient is coming to you with sneezing and runny nose, and you are checking his temperature, and you are coming to know that he has elevated temperature, then it becomes sign. So I think you got the difference. Now diagnosis, you're going to identify a disease or determination of nature of disease. You're going to identify that this patient has this disease. So that is diagnosis. It can be provisional diagnosis and differential diagnosis. So whatever it is, you're going to diagnose the complaint, what the patient exactly has, what's the disease. Pyrexia is a term which is used for fever. Again, some terms. Otomy means to open and then close a whole organ. Laparotomy. So we can see here abdominal incision has made to show some structures. Edema is a swelling due to accumulation of fluid in extracellular space. So it can happen due to different reasons. Basically, edema is a swelling. Hemorrhage. This is bleeding. It can be external or internal. External bleeding can be seen, but internal bleeding cannot be seen. It is in the visceral organs usually. Necrosis. It is the local death of a tissue or organ, and that leads to irreversible damage to nucleus. That is necrosis. Nucleus is a part of the cell. Atrophy, where the cell size is getting reduced, tissue size is getting reduced. Ultimately, the organ is going to get reduced. So it is due to loss of nutrition. So atrophy mainly is due to loss of nutrition, where the cell size, tissue size, organ size is going to reduce. Paralysis, loss of motor power of a part of the body due to denervation. the nerve injury. It can be due to nerve injury. A muscle is getting paralyzed because the nerve which is supplying it is getting denervated, or it can be due to primary disease of a muscle. So a muscle may have its own disorder. So that is why it may get paralyzed or loss of motor activity. Now anesthesia. Anesthesia is loss of touch sensibility. Coma, deep unconsciousness is called as coma. So these are some of the terms which are used. Now talking about organization of the body, human body, how it is oriented or how it is organized generally. So here, basically, when we do the dissection of any part of the body, we have to go through all these layers. So the first thing that you are going to cut in a dissected or in a dissection is the skin. Then you will be cutting or you'll be entering into superficial fascia, which is below the skin. Then if you remove the superficial fascia, you'll be entering into deep fascia. So skin, you can see the skin, right? And this is superficially placed. Superficial fascia is a connective tissue. Deep fascia is also a connective tissue. We will see what is connective tissue in the coming classes. Now, deep to deep fascia, we have muscles. And deep to that, you will see neurovascular bundle, where you will see nerves and vessels. Vessels includes arteries and veins. Then you will see the bones. So these are different layers: skin, superficial fascia, deep fascia, muscle, neurovascular bundle, and the bones. In case of thorax and abdomen, where you have cavities, in thorax and abdomen, you will see skin, superficial fascia, deep fascia in the thorax specifically, then and abdomen as well, right? Yeah, and then you will see the organs. For example, in the thorax, you will see the lungs, heart. In the abdomen, you will see a lot of organs like stomach, intestines, liver, and so on. So this is the orientation. Now coming to each part. So skin, we will see skin later. Coming to superficial fascia. So I said already, superficial fascia is a connective tissue. So it is as soon as you remove the skin, just below the skin, you will see yellow colored structure here, which has a lot of fat in it, which is more in females, the fat deposition. That is called as superficial fascia. So look at this here, skin, below that yellow colored area, that is superficial fascia. So it's a general coating of the body beneath the skin made of loose areolar tissue with varying amounts of fat. Now fat is abundant in gluteal region. Some of the areas we will see that the fat is more accumulated. For example, in the gluteal region, which is called as the buttocks region, lumbar region, flank region, front of the thigh, and the anterior abdominal wall below the umbilicus and the mammary gland or the breast. So these areas, fat is getting deposited in a more amount. So fat is usually deposited in the superficial fascia. And there are some areas where you will not see the fat in the superficial fascia. They are eyelids. Your eyelid is not having any fat. External ear, they also don't have any fat in the superficial fascia. Coming to functions of superficial fascia, so remember always, when you remove the skin, which is mentioned here as A, the one that you can see below is the superficial fascia represented as B. And when you remove superficial fascia, you will see the deep fascia. Deep to the deep fascia, you will see the muscle. The brown color that you can see here is the muscle. Anyway, coming to the function of the superficial fascia, it facilitates movements of the skin. So it allows gliding movements of the skin. So the skin is moving on the superficial fascia, in other words, and it serves as a soft medium for passage of vessels and nerves. So in the superficial fascia, you will not only see the fat, you will also see superficial nerves and vessels. They are very tiny structures, can be seen in this area, which basically supplies the skin. So we have tiny structures like superficial nerves and vessels. And the other function of the superficial fascia is it is going to conserve the body heat because the fat is a bad conductor of heat. So that is the other function of superficial fascia. Coming to deep fascia. So deep fascia is below the superficial fascia. So when you cut the superficial fascia, you can see the deep fascia. So it is thick. When you compare the superficial fascia, it is thick. It invests the body beneath the superficial fascia, and it is not having any fat, and it is inelastic and tough. So the character of deep fascia is different from that of superficial fascia, and the deep fascia is well defined in the limbs, upper limb and the lower limb. It is well defined, and it is ill defined on the trunks and face. Whereas on the trunk and the face, the deep fascia is not defined well. Coming to modification of deep fascia is modified in particular areas. Here in the limbs, this is the arm. In the arm, you have a bone, and that bone is humerus. When you take a cut section of the, you can see this line here. This line, if you just think that we are going to cut this area, it looks like this. So here, this is the humerus, which is placed at the center, and this area is the flexor surface. The flexor surface, and this area is the extensor surface. Extensor surface is back of the arm. So this is skin. Just below you have the superficial fascia, and this blue line is the deep fascia. Deep fascia is surrounding, right, the arm. Also, the deep fascia is sending some septa into the bone. It sends a septa into the bone, and these septas are called as intermuscular septa. So what this intermuscular septa does is that it is going to divide the arm into two compartments. So whatever you can see anterior to the intermuscular septa, this is anterior compartment. Whatever you can see posteriorly is posterior compartment of the arm. So intermuscular septa are extensions from the deep fascia, which goes and attaches to the bones, underlying bone, which divides the area into compartments. Here we have anterior compartment and posterior compartment.